Harry says, yes, I will. And then his father says, do it now. Be ready to run. Do what now? Break the connection? That's what he's saying. Harry yells, now. Pulls his wand up so that the beams of light break off. Harry runs, knocks over 2 Death Eaters. Voldemort yells, stun him. 10 feet from Cedric, Harry dives behind a marble angel. Okay. And then he does Oxio as he points at the Triwizard Cup. Okay. Grabs onto Cedric's wrist and does Oxio. Why doesn't he do Oxio? Stay behind the marble angel thing and Oxio Cedric's body and the portkey cup. I don't know. He's not thinking, I guess.
Doesn't want Cedric's body flying out?
Well, yeah, it could be too. So he gets back to Hogwarts. And what do we hear? Page 671. Cornelius Fudge. My God. Diggory. He's dead. That wasn't supposed to happen. Notice, even with the best plans, somebody's dead. And it starts to ripple out through the audience. What? Cedric Diggory dead? Fudge tells Harry to let go. Okay. And so Moody takes Harry up to Hogwarts, to the castle. Harry says, middle of 673, made a potion, got his body back. The Dark Lord got his body back. He's returned. The Death Eaters came. We dueled. You dueled with the Dark Lord? Got away, my wand, did something funny. In here, Harry, sit down. Okay. 675. Moody asks, what did the Dark Lord do? He says, I asked you whether he forgave the scum who never even went to look for him. Those treacherous cowards who wouldn't even brave Azkaban for him. The faithless, worthless bits of filth who were brave enough to cavort in masks at the Quidditch World Cup, but fled at the sight of the dark mark when I fired it in. You fired? No, what do you... I told you, Harry, I told you. If there's one thing I hate more than the other, it's a Death Eater who walked free. Okay? So he goes on and talks. Harry's thinking, this can't be. This guy's been the best defense against the dark arts teacher I've ever had. He can't be on Voldemort's side. Who put your name in the Goblet of Fire under the name of a different school? I did. Who frightened off every person I thought might try to hurt you? I did. Who nudged Hagrid into showing you the dragons? I did. Who helped you see the way to beat the dragons? I did. Who told Dobby you needed gillyweed? All the way on down the line. It hasn't been easy, Harry, guiding you through these tests without arousing suspicion. And then he goes on and says, I also had to contend with your stupidity. You need a little bit of truth there, The second task, that was when I was most afraid we would fail. I was keeping watching you, Potter. I knew you hadn't worked out the egg's clue, so I had to give you another hint. Cedric didn't. Who told Cedric to open it underwater? I did. Why? I trusted that he would pass the information on to you. Decent people are so easy to manipulate. Why? Why are decent people so easy to manipulate? Because they believe others are decent and honorable also. In other words, decent people believe the best of others. I was sure Cedric would want to repay you for telling him about the dragons. And so he did. He goes, but even then, you seemed like you were going to fail. All those hours in the library. He said, and Neville Longbottom had the book you needed all along from the beginning of the year. What did Harry never do? He never asked for help. How often does he ask for help? Books 1 through 3. He kind of does it on his own. Even, in book 1, when he says, I'm going down into the trap door, Hermione and Ron say, well, we're coming with you. Harry, no, not really. You don't need to. He wants to do it on his own. He wouldn't have gotten very far, would he? No, the devil's snare would have killed him. He might have gotten past Fluffy, but probably not. Okay? He says, so what could I do? I had to feed you information from another source. You were so long in the lake, Potter. I thought you had drowned. But luckily, Dumbledore took your idiocy for nobility. Why idiocy? Barty Crouch Jr. is revealing about himself here. Would he have taken additional time to make sure the other hostages? No. Who cares about them? All right? So he says, and once you got into the maze, what did he do? I stunned Fleur Delacroix. Furious curse on Crumb. Harry, it made no sense. Top of 678. Didn't manage to kill you, Potter, and he so wanted to. Imagine how he'll reward me. He'd never reach his wand in time. The Dark Lord and I have much in common. Both of us, for instance, had very disappointing fathers. Very disappointing indeed. Both of us suffered the indignity, Harry, of being named after those fathers. And both of us had the pleasure, the very great pleasure, of killing our fathers. Harry, you're crazy. And the door, bursts open. And we read on 679. At that moment, Harry fully understood for the first time why people said Dumbledore was the only wizard Voldemort had ever feared. Why? Because you don't have the nice, grandfatherly headmaster staring in the door, looking kind of, feeble. Now we get Gandalf the White, uncloaked, as it were. The look upon Dumbledore's face as he stared down at the unconscious form of Madame was more terrible than Harry could have ever imagined. Now, you can imagine that Harry can imagine some pretty terrible looks by people. But the look on Dumbledore's face is shocking. There was no benign smile upon Dumbledore's face. No twinkle in the eyes. Cold fury in every line of the ancient face. In other words, you don't want to see Dumbledore this way. You don't want to anger Albus Dumbledore. Okay? So, Dumbledore points out to Harry, this isn't Alastor Moody. Why? What makes Dumbledore finally understand? Dumbledore, Alice, the real have taken Harry away from Dumbledore's side that night. The real Alastor Moody would have realized the safest place for Harry, right there beside Dumbledore. Okay? The moment he took you, I knew, and I followed. So, truth potion, they give him the Veritaserum, and what happens? Barty Crouch Jr. spills the beans. Talks about how his father came, all this kind of stuff. Okay? Tells him how Winky took Harry's wand, how he used the wand to do the Dark Mark, how the Dark Lord, asked him, are you willing to sacrifice everything for me? Are you willing to do all this? And he says, okay. And we get the parting of the ways. Dumbledore's got some things. He tells Snape to go talk to Madame Pomfrey, to come down here, okay, to get the real Alastor drunk and up into the hospital wing. What else? Get Cornelius Fudge, bring him up to this office. He's going to want to question Crouch. And he says, Harry, you need to come with me. We need to get Sirius, or we need to talk to Sirius and some other stuff. and Harry asks Diggory's. Notice, Harry has just fought off Voldemort again. He's just seen one of his most trusted teachers turn out to be Voldemort's most trusted servant. And he's not thinking about himself. Who's he thinking about? He's not thinking about Cedric. He's thinking about Cedric's parents. What they must be experiencing. They've just lost their son. And that's what Harry thinks about. At this moment, Voldemort, hell is about to break loose. And he's thinking about their pain. Okay? So, Dumbledore's office, page 694. And Dumbledore says, I need to know what happened after you touched the port key. We can wait on that. Don't put Harry, let him sleep. And Harry's like, oh, thank you, Sirius. I'm really tired, and I don't want to relive it. But Dumbledore says, if I thought I could help you by putting you into an enchanted state, postpone the moment when you'd have to think about what has happened tonight, I would. You know, I could put you under a sleep potion, let you sleep for a month. But what would still have to happen?
Still have to face it when we woke up.
He'd still have to face it. He would still have to recount for Dumbledore every moment. And what would that do? Yeah, you might get 30 days worth of sleep. But then you have to re-experience it. What's better? To re-experience it now when it's still fresh, when it's still close, when you're still under the shock of it, to go off to, Cancun for 30 days and then have to come back and go through hell again. Why not just finish going through hell now, then go off to Cancun for 30 days? No, I know better. Numbing the pain for a while will make it worse when you finally feel it. I think this is J.K. Rowling telling her audience something. Live the pain. To do what? To get through it. In other words, not all pain is bad. Some pain can be beneficial. All right? You have shown bravery beyond anything I could have expected. I ask you to demonstrate your courage once more. Tell us what happened. So Harry tells them everything. Tells them about Wormtail cutting his hand off. And then he says on page 696, he said my blood would make him stronger than if he'd used someone else's. He said the protection my mother left in me, he'd have it too. He was right. He could touch me without hurting himself. He touched my face. And for a fleeting instant, Harry thought he saw a gleam of something like triumph in Dumbledore's eyes. It's at this point Dumbledore knows what must happen. Book 7. Harry and Voldemort have got to face each other again. And they've essentially got to do what they did in this book. Avada Kedavra, Expelliarmus. Because Dumbledore now knows what is now coursing through Voldemort's veins. Lily's protection, which means what really? A little bit of Harry. Okay? What did, I'm not talking literally, but kind of. What did Voldemort do of Harry? Or of Harry's blood? Think book 6 and 7.
Kept it alive.
Okay. What else? I mean, yes. Keep going with that. What did he make of Harry? Bingo. He made a Horcrux out of Harry. But where is that Horcrux? In Voldemort. Just as Dumbledore tells Harry in book 2, Voldemort put a piece of him in you the night he gave you that curse. Okay. Notice what Dumbledore actually says there in book 2. Dumbledore says, Voldemort transferred some of his powers to you. And Harry interprets that, and Harry restates it. It's pretty important how Rowling puts that in at the end of book 2. Harry says, okay, in response to Dumbledore saying, Voldemort transferred some of his powers to you. Harry takes that to mean he put a bit of himself in me. That's exactly what Dumbledore means, even though Dumbledore did not use those words. That's what making a Horcrux is, putting a bit of yourself in something else. So now Voldemort has put a bit of Harry in himself. So Voldemort can't really die until what happens?
Harry does die.
Until that bit of Harry dies. Okay? Or until Harry dies. But can Harry, the 9/10 that is Harry, really die? Not until the bit in Voldemort dies. Okay? So he really can be like what Mad Max says about the Man in Black. He can be mostly dead, but not all the way dead. Okay? So, they keep talking. Harry tells what happens when they do the spells. And Sirius says, the wand's connected? Why? Dumbledore, priori incantatem. What does it mean? Prior incantation. Sirius, the reverse spell effect? Exactly. Harry's wand and Voldemort's wand share cores. In other words, if it had been Sirius in the cemetery, the reverse spell effect would not have occurred. Why? His wand and Voldemort's wand aren't brothers. They don't share the same core. Each of them contains a feather from the tail of the same phoenix. This phoenix, and it's like he's petting Fox, you know. In fact, Harry, my wand's feather came from Fox? Yes. Ollivander wrote and told me the day you got your wand. Sirius, notice, Sirius doesn't understand what this means. So what happens when a wand meets its brother? You would think Sirius would know this. They won't work properly against each other. Ah, that's kind of important. So if Harry and Voldemort go against each other at some later point and they're using the same wands, what's going to happen? Same thing. They won't work properly. So one of them's got to get a different wand. Well, what happens by the end of book 7? They both get different wands. Okay? If, however, the owners of the wands force the wands to, a very rare effect will take place. One of the wands will force the other to regurgitate spells it has performed in reverse. Well, no, Sirius already said the reverse spell effect. Okay? Dumbledore, which means some form of Cedric must have reappeared. Diggory came back to life. No spell can reawaken the dead, says Dumbledore. No. Here's what would have happened. A kind of reverse echo. A shadow of the living Cedric would have emerged from the wand. Okay, now, here's where you could possibly get by and say, Dumbledore doesn't mean echo the way I've talked about echo, because he says a shadow of the living Cedric. I think it all depends by the living Cedric. Does he mean the living Cedric, the Cedric who 10 minutes previously, whose body was alive? Does he mean that living Cedric? Or does he mean kind of an emanation of the real Cedric, The Cedric who is alive, but not in the body. Okay. What happens, book 5, which hopefully we'll get to today, when Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville, Luna, and Ginny get to the Ministry of Magic,
They see the veil.
and they go into the death room with the veil. Why is Harry intrigued by the veil? He hears voices. Who else hears voices? Luna. That's kind of,
She always hears voices.
yeah, she's kind of loony. Okay. What voices do they hear?
Friends.
What does Luna tell Harry at the novel? Come on, Harry. You heard them? The voices behind the veil? Well, what's the context that she's saying that? It's when she tells him, it's not like I'll never see Mom again. Harry's like, what? What do you mean you'll never see your mother again? What is Harry in that passage in book 5? What's he been doing just before he sees Luna? Anybody remember? About? And?
Talking to him. If he'll become
What happens
ghost.
after that?
What happens after death? Harry has never been to church. I think it is safe to assume with the Dursleys. Because he's never heard anything about the afterlife. He knows there is some kind of how. Nearly Headless Nick, Fat Friar, Bloody Baron. There are ghosts. But he's never really thought, well, what happens when you die? Dumbledore tells him at the end of book 1, death is but the next great adventure to those who have a well-organized mind. Nearly Headless Nick tells him he will have gone on. What do you mean, gone on? Gone on where? Don't know. What do you mean you don't? He goes, yeah, but I never went on. So he goes to Luna. And Luna says, come on, Harry. It's not like we'll never see. How? Because they're not dead. The soul has gone on. Harry, he spoke to me. That is, this shadow of the living Cedric, he spoke to me, the ghost Cedric. Dumbledore. Oh, come on, Harry, let's not jump to conclusions here. An echo. Well, the echo didn't say, wand's out, do you reckon? No. The echo said, hold on, Harry. Which retains Cedric's appearance and character. I'm guessing other such forms appear, recent victims, an old man, Bertha Jorkins. Your parents? Yes. The last murders the wand performed, in reverse order. More would have appeared, of course, had you made the connection. How many more? We're going to find out in book 5. A lot more. Mrs. Weasley's brother, Fabian Pruitt. Who else? How about Regulus Arcturus Black? Even though he didn't die literally by the wand, drank the potion and stuff. Okay? Okay, Harry, so what did these echoes, these shadows do? It's almost like Dumbledore wants to intentionally not be clear to Harry. So Harry describes what happened. And Dumbledore says, I'll say it again. You've shown bravery beyond anything I could have expected of you tonight, Harry. You've shown bravery equal to those who died fighting Voldemort at the heights. Like his parents. All right? You've shouldered a grown wizard's burden, and how old is he? 14. Remember what Ron said back in Hogsmeade? Try us, why don't you? When Sirius says, well, you wouldn't know, we're too young. Harry proves, no, we're not. And now you've given us all we have a right to expect. What's he mean? What's Dumbledore talking about? You give us all we have a right to expect. What do they have a right to expect from Harry? Great things. What did Ollivander say when Harry got his wand? We must expect great things from you. Okay? What did the Sorting Hat see in Harry when he first put it on? He has a thirst to prove himself. Why? Because everybody expects so much of him. All right? She says, now you get your sleeping potion. So I'm going to take you to the hospital wing. Harry goes in, and who's in the hospital wing? Mrs. Weasley, Bill, Ron, Hermione. Mrs. Weasley goes and smothers him in her bosom and everything. Dumbledore says, just let him sleep. Harry's been through a lot tonight. Harry's been through a lot tonight. Talk about understatement of the year. What has Harry really been through? More than anybody who has ever faced Voldemort. Because he's the only one who's lived. Twice now. I'll take that back. 3 times now? Book 1, book 2. This is the 3rd. 4 times now. And as a baby. Okay? So, Harry goes off to sleep and then he wakes up. And there's Fudge and McGonagall. And they're yelling. And Dumbledore goes off to find them, page 702. Or they come in. And Dumbledore asks, what's happened? Why are you disturbing these people? Minerva, I told you to stand watch over Barty Crouch. She goes, there's no need to stand with him anymore. The minister has seen to that. What has the minister done? Authorized the divorce. Why?
He doesn't have to face the facts.
Which facts?
Those facts.
The facts. That Voldemort's back. What does he assume? Barty Crouch was just crazy. But there's no proof, okay, that what he says is true. Could there be proof other than Harry?
Cedric's dead body.
Cedric's dead body, which would be circumstantial evidence. What kind of proof could they get from Barty Crouch? What kind of testimony? Through Veritaserum. Put him under Veritaserum, and what happens? The whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me Albus Dumbledore, as it were. Fudge, my dear woman, top of 703. As Minister of Magic, it's my decision whether I wish to bring protection with me. Possibly dangerous. Harry felt a chill in his stomach as McGonagall struggled to describe what happened. Now, beginning of book 3, what did Harry think about the Dementors? Well, it's what Sirius Black deserves. Now, not so much. Fudge, by all accounts, he is no loss. Sound like anybody?
Is it possible that the Dementor at this point was acting under Voldemort's orders?
Very. Okay. Yeah, it's entirely possible. Because notice what it does. He opens the door in the Dementors in a lip lock with Barty Crouch Jr. Okay? Who else, however, does Fudge sound like when he says, by all accounts, he is no loss?
The older Crouch.
The older Crouch? How about enemy and deserves death? Frodo at the beginning of Lord of the Rings. He is only an enemy, he says about Gollum. He deserves death. And that's when Gandalf gives that great reply. Deserves it, I dare say he does. Many that live deserve to, many that die, many that live deserve death. Some that live deserve to die. Can you give it to them? Okay? He cannot give evidence, Dumbledore says. He cannot now give testimony. He cannot give evidence to people. Well, it's because he is a raving lunatic. Voldemort was giving him instructions, Cornelius. Notice, Cornelius. Why does Dumbledore call him by his first name?
Brings him outside.
Lowers him. Okay? Just like in book 5, we're going to see Dumbledore say, "It was a foolish thing to come here tonight, Tom." He could have even lowered Voldemort even more by saying, "Tommy." Tommy. Yeah, Thomas. Okay. Now, Tom Marvolo Riddle, you stop that. Those people's deaths were mere byproducts of a plan to restore Voldemort to full strength again. The plan succeeded. Voldemort is being restored to his body. And Fudge just looks like he'd been punched. Notice, how many times has Dumbledore said Voldemort in the last few minutes? Several. You know who? Okay. He can't even say the word. As Minerva and Severus have doubtless told you, we heard Barty Crouch confess. 3 witnesses to the confession. In our system of law, they would be what? Hearsay. Okay? Unless it had been transcribed, in a hearing room and all that kind of stuff. See here, Dumbledore, you can't be serious. You know who back. Come now. I mean, he might have believed himself to be acting on Voldemort's. So Dumbledore tells what happened. Okay, so you're basing this on the Harry Potter? Harry, you've been reading the Daily Prophet. Because what has Rita Skeeter done to Harry's reputation?
He's disturbed and dangerous.
Destroyed it. He's disturbed and dangerous. I believe, Harry, says Dumbledore. You're prepared to believe that Lord Voldemort has returned. Oh, he can finally say the name. On the boy who... Listen to me, Cornelius, Dumbledore said of 705. And notice what the narrator tells us. That heat, that fury starts to radiate. Harry is as sane as you or I. That scar upon his forehead has not addled his brains. It hurts him when Voldemort is close by. He goes, Harry, I saw Voldemort come back. I saw the Death Eaters. I can give you their names. Malfoy was cleared. Very old family. What does he mean? Pure blood. Rich. Donations to excellent cause. Hello. Part of the problem. Avery, Knott, Crabbe, Goyle. Okay. You're merely repeating the names of those who were acquitted being Death Eaters. What should that start? Maybe they weren't acquitted after all? Okay. McGonagall, you fool, said Mr. Crouch. These deaths were not the random work of a lunatic. I see no evidence to the contrary. Okay. So Dumbledore finally tells him what needs to be said. Middle of 707. If they take the necessary measures, we may still be able to save the situation. So here's what you do first. Get rid of the Dementors from... Why? Because they're Voldemort's most trusted servants. Okay? And then what else does he say? Send an emissary to the giants. Are you mad? Okay? And Dumbledore tells him, you are blinded by the love of the office you hold. He's blinded by what? What does he mean by the love of the office you hold? Percy was reading prefects who gained. Okay? You place too much importance, you always have done, on the so-called purity of blood. You fail to recognize it matters not what someone is, but what they grow to be. Do we need an example? Look at Harry's son in book 7. Albus Severus. Look at Snape. Look at what Snape was born. Okay? The quote-unquote half-blood prince. Look at the family he was raised in. Look at Hagrid. Look at the family he was raised in. Look at Neville. Okay? Neville, there was great doubt as to whether or not he was even magical until his Uncle Algie dropped him from the third floor, and he bounced down the street. Okay? Who enables in Book 7 Harry to finally do what he does? Neville. Because it's Neville that kills Nagini. It's Neville that takes care of the final Horcrux. Harry never would have been able to kill, or take that back, to stop Voldemort if it hadn't been for Neville. Okay? That's what Dumbledore's getting at. He says, here you talk about purebloods. Here you talk about old families. Well, your Dementor is just, essentially, the last remaining member of a pureblood family as old as any. And see what he made of his life. He chose poorly. Malfoy. Poor faith. Poor trust. He says, but you, Cornelius, if you take the actions I am suggesting, yeah, you might be thrown out of office. But how will you be remembered? He won't be remembered as the Neville Chamberlain of the Ministry of Magic. The guy who paved the way for World War II to start. He says you will be remembered as one of the bravest and greatest ministers of magic who failed to act. And history will remember you as the man who stepped aside and allowed Lord Voldemort a second chance to destroy the world. And so what does Fudge do? 709. Now see here, Dumbledore. I've given you free rein. I've had great respect. I might not have agreed with your decisions. But if you're going to work against me, no, only one I'm going to work against is Voldemort, Dumbledore says. If you're against him, then we remain on the same side. Notice the logic. If you're against Voldemort, then we're on the same side. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. He's also saying, however, if you're not with me, you're against me. Okay? So, he can't be back, Dumbledore. He just can't be. Why not? Why does Fudge say that? He wants to believe the fiction that he can't be back. What happens if Voldemort is back?
History repeats itself.
History repeats itself? What else?
Chaos.
Chaos? The beautiful little world he thinks he's created. Poof. The bubble bursts. And where do we end up? It's no longer September 10th, 2001. It's now 9/11. That's what it means. It's now 9/11, 9/12, 9/13, 9/14. In other words, from every moment, from this moment on, eyes are open. If what Dumbledore is correct. Okay? And so Snape finally chimes in. And what does he do? Pulls his sleeve up and says, look! Now what is that? Visual proof. The dark mark burn on a Death Eater's arm. Only when Voldemort called them. Only when Voldemort went, and touched one. Okay? This is how Fudge should know. Death Eater, Snape says, top of 710, had the sign burn into him by the Dark Lord. It was a means of distinguishing one another, his means of summoning us to him. In other words, they're not all the same. When he touched the mark of any Death Eater, we were to apparate instantly at his side. The mark's been growing clearer all year. Karkaroff's too. Why do you think he fled? Fudge, I don't know what you guys are doing. but I've got to return to the ministry. So what does he do? Drops the money on Harry's bedside and leaves. And so Dumbledore says, okay, folks, got to get to work. What do we hear? Bill's going to go alert Arthur. Okay. Molly's going to alert some people. Pomfrey's going to go down to Moody's office. She's going to find Winky. Okay, do what you can for her. What else? Top of our number to recognize each other for what they are. What does he mean? He doesn't only mean Sirius. This is Snape. Snape, this is Sirius. Recognize each other on the same side. In other words, put your old hostility and animosity aside. And Sirius transformed back into himself, and Molly, Sirius Black, crazy murderer. Ron, shut up, Mom. Okay. Snape, what's he doing here? He's here at my invitation, just like you are. That's Dumbledore's way of saying, I trust you, Severus, just like I trust Sirius. So they shake hands, and he tells Sirius, go alert the old crowd. Remus Lupin and Dungus Fletcher. Okay. And he says, Severus, if you're ready, I am. What do we know Severus has to do there?
He has to go back to Voldemort.
He has to go back. Because we heard in the pensive that Severus turned a spy. So he's got to remain a spy. We also heard Voldemort talking to the Death Eaters say what? About one of the Death Eaters who did not apparate. One of our group has left us forever. He will be killed. I don't think he's talking there about Karkaroff. He does say one has fled. He'll be hunted down. He's talking about Snape. All right? He thinks Snape is a spy. Find out what Snape was able to do until book 5. So, Harry says, I don't want the gold. Anybody else can have it. And we get chapter 37, the beginning. The beginning of what? The war. Mars is bright tonight. Well, you can imagine how bright Mars is at this point. The war has begun, right? So, Harry talks to Hagrid. Hagrid says, Dumbledore's got a job for me. And it's now the end of the year feast. And Dumbledore says, there's a lot I want to talk to you tonight, but, let's raise a toast to Cedric Diggory. But he does. All of them were told. Harry catches a glimpse of Cho, and she's, tears streaming down her face. And Dumbledore says, bottom of 721, Cedric was a person who exemplified many of the qualities that distinguish Hufflepuff House. Hard worker, valued fair play. You take it. I wouldn't have gotten this far if it weren't for you, he tells Harry. His death has affected you all whether you knew him well or not. So you need to know why he died. And notice what Dumbledore tells them. Cedric Diggory was murdered by Lord Voldemort. And the Ministry of Magic doesn't want you to know this. Okay, when he says the Ministry of Magic doesn't want you to know this, what would that be like in our world? It would be like, well, no, it wouldn't be like WikiLeaks. It would be like somebody equivalent in authority to the president, standing up and saying, the president doesn't want you to know this, but I think you have the right to. I don't know if it'd be like, Secretary of State, former president, okay, but somebody like that is respected, greatly respected. What does he say? Possible some of your parents will even be horrified that I'm telling you, but I'm going to tell you. Voldemort's back. Full power. And you know what? The truth is preferable to lies. And any attempt to pretend that Cedric died as a result of an accident or blunder on his own is an insult to his memory. In other words, Cedric didn't die of anything he did. And there's one person who can tell us, Harry Potter. And there's a ripple of, noise. Harry Potter managed to escape Lord Voldemort. He risked his own life to return Cedric's body. He showed in every respect bravery that few wizards have shown. And for this I honor him. Harry raised his glass, and notice now nearly everyone does it. Because Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle and some of the other Slytherins remain silently in their seats. Why?
Their characters are theaters.
So Dumbledore goes on, bottom of 723. Every guest in this hall will be welcome back here at any time. Why? Because we're only as strong as we are united. As weak as we are divided. We. The magical schools. The magical people. Okay? Voldemort's gift for spreading discord and enmity is very great. We can fight it. How? By showing a strong bond of friendship and trust. Friendship, love, loyalty to each other. Differences of habit and language are nothing if our aims are identical and our hearts are open. That's love. A closed heart capable of loving. So what's he saying? As long as we trust our Durmstrang friends and our Boba. So finally he gives this closing part. Remember, Cedric. If the time should come when you have to make a choice between what is right and what is easy, remember what happened to a boy who was good and kind and brave because he strayed across the path of Lord Voldemort. Notice, because he strayed across the path. Not because what Cedric did was necessarily good and kind and brave. He didn't challenge Voldemort. He merely was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And what did Voldemort do? Kill the spare. He wasn't needed. All right? Remember Cedric Diggory. Now notice what he says there. If you have to make a choice between what is right and what's easy, not a choice between what is right and what is wrong. Right and easy. He's saying, don't choose the easy choice. And what might happen? You might die. You might die. This is what Tolkien would say on fairy stories. When he says, fairy stories, if we can talk about the lessons that they teach, can dignity, integrity, and such on youth. How? By bringing the shadow of death, by bringing peril into it. What is Rowling saying to her audience who began reading these books, let's say, at age 9 or 10? That by the age of 13 or 14, they come across, wow. Make the hard choice. Yeah, you might suffer for it, but make the hard choice. Okay? We'll stop. And go to Order of the Phoenix. Notice how Book 4 began. Not at number 4, Privet Drive. So what does she do? She takes us back. It's almost like Rowling wants to say, this book is special. It sits kind of outside the series. It does. This book, as I've said before, it's the hinge. The first 3 books point to it, okay? And the last 3 books flow from it, all right? It's crucially important. So, what do we see in the beginning of this book? Chapter 1. What's Harry been doing in his summer so far?
He's been trying to watch the news.
Why? Because Voldemort's back. So what's he expecting? Chaos. Shit. Shit's going to hit the fan. I almost said shit. I have no idea what that word is. Chaos. The shit's going to hit the fan. Okay? That's what. But he doesn't see it. Moreover, what else is happening or not happening? Harry doesn't know anything. He's hearing stuff from Hermione, but he doesn't know what's going on. She and Ron are together. He doesn't know how. Okay? And so what do we see happening in Harry's mind at the beginning? Okay, first of all, he's 15, or almost 15. And so what's he going through? What's he need? Some people would say, well, maybe he needs to get laid. I don't mean that. What's he need? He needs to be taken out beat. That's what he needs. He just needs a good whooping. Okay? So where do we see the angst?
Urging Dudley on.
Yeah, man. He's egging Dudley on. And we're told, page 7, he leaves. He's walking down to the corner park. And we're told at the bottom of the page, Harry felt a dull, sinking sensation in his stomach. And before he knew it, the feeling of hopelessness that had plagued him all summer rolled over him once again. I mean, he's just full of despair. And we're told, top of 8, Harry's thinking, why should he keep taking the Daily Prophet? I mean, there's nothing in there. And the only news Harry's interested in is news about Voldemort. Okay? He lives, the little letter he gets from Hermione. We can't tell you about you-know-what. We can't tell you where we are. We can't tell you what's going on. All of which serves to tell Harry, there's a lot going on. We know a bunch. We're having fun. And you're screwed. Meanwhile, bottom of page 9, he's having nightmares about Cedric. He is seeing, seemingly light, green flashing light, and Harry's dead. Cedric's dead. Voldemort rising out of the cauldron, all this kind of stuff. And we're told on page 10, top of the page, the injustice of it all welled up inside him so that he wanted to yell with fury. Why is it an injustice?
Because he should be the first.
Yeah, he's the one who's every time. How come he doesn't know? If it hadn't been for him, nobody would even know Voldemort was back. And what's his reward? Stuck with the Dursleys. Okay? Page 11 at the bottom. He's down there. He's at the thing. Don't turn around. They don't see him. They're almost at the railings. And what are we told? It's the first time we hear this in the novels. Harry mastered the impulse to call after them. Okay? What are we told? Harry masters an impulse. What's an impulse? It's an urge inside the time. Reach for that extra cigarette. Reach for that extra beer. Okay? But what does he do? He controls it. This is what's important. This book is entirely about Harry starting to learn self-control. It's entirely about that. It takes her 800 No, 871, I think, pages in the American edition. And 70 pages to get that point across. All right? But he doesn't fully master it here. It takes until book 7, when Harry is burying Dobby, before it really finally sinks in. Because it's when he's burying Dobby that he decides not to do something. Not to go after the Elder Wand. That's when he finally masters himself. So this is a virtue that Harry's got to learn. Self-control. How much self-control does Ron have? Control does Voldemort have? Zip. Okay? Seeking a fight was not a smart move. He must not use magic. He'd be risking expulsion again. And he thinks to himself, okay, there you go, Sirius. Here, I'm being a good boy. Just the opposite of what you and Dad would do. So Dudley and his friends go on talking. He can hear them as they talk. Dudley's friends turn off. And page 13, Harry goes, hey, Big D. Oh, it's you. So how long you been Big D then? Shut it. Cool name, but you always beat Ickle Diddykins to me. I said, shut it. You know, what has happened between book 4 and book 5 with Dudley? Okay, Harry's not scared of him anymore. What else?
He's lost.
With
weight.
Dudley. He's lost weight. Is that all?
He's become a champion.
He's the Southeast boxing champion. Okay, which means Southeast England. Surrey, probably Sussex, and Kent. The bottom fourth, as it were. This isn't a little thing. Buff over the year. He's been working out. Now he's got muscle. And here is Harry. Has Harry gotten buff? Has Harry gone from being, Mr. Little Winkling to Hugh Jackman? No. He's still little Mr. Weakling. Shut your face. You don't tell her to shut your face. How about Popkin or Dinky Diddykums? Diddydums. Can I use them? Can I call you Dinky Diddydums? Dudley says nothing. Notice what Dudley's able to do. Exercise self-control. You've been beating up tonight. Another 10-year-old? I know you did Mark Evans too. Oh, yeah. Well, he was asking for it. How old is Dudley?
15.
Isn't Dudley a year older than him? 16-year-old beating up a 15-year-old? A 10-year-old? Oh, yeah? He cheeked me. Did he? Did he say you look like a pig that's been taught to walk on its own? Because that's not cheek, Dud. It's true. Okay, now, what's Harry doing here?
Taunting him.
Being an ass, taunting him, egging him. He's essentially saying, come on, you want to do it. Take a swing. And notice we're told the muscles twitching in Dudley's jaw. He is so close. It gave Harry enormous satisfaction to know how furious he was making Dudley. Notice that. What is Harry taking pleasure in? Let me rephrase that. What is Dudley experiencing? Irritation, frustration? Are those pleasant emotions? No. Okay? So Dudley's not feeling good. We're told Dudley is feeling furious. And how is Harry feeling? Triumph, elation, joy. In other words, Harry's getting off on this. This makes Harry feel really good that Dudley feels really bad. So what's this tell us about Harry? Remember what Frodo tells Saruman at the end of The Lord of the Rings? When Saruman says, I will take enormous pleasure in knowing how I've ruined the Shire and made your lives miserable. Frodo says, if that's what you take pleasure in, then I pity you. Okay? That's what Harry is taking pleasure in. Is that the Harry we've come to love? No. So why is Harry behaving this way? There's a little piece of Voldemort in him that's growing stronger. Why? Because the big piece of Voldemort outside of him is growing stronger. Okay? Harry felt as though he was siphoning off his own frustration to his cousin. Think of that language for a minute. Here's Harry. Here's Dudley. And Harry feels like he's siphoned off some of his frustration onto Dudley. In other words, what does Harry feel like he's doing? Okay, keep going with that. He's doing what? He's putting some of them. He's horcruxing what? What he doesn't want in himself into Dudley. Okay? In other words, he's behaving just like Voldemort. They turn down the alleyway, and Dudley's going to turn this. Think you're a big man carrying that thing, don't you? What thing? That thing you're hiding. Not as stupid as you look, are you, Dud? But I suppose if you were, you wouldn't be able to walk and talk at the same time. Just, Harry pulls out his wand. You're not allowed. I know you're not. You'll get expelled. You haven't changed the rules. They haven't. You haven't got the guts to take me on without that thing. Have you? No, he doesn't. Dudley's entirely right there. Harry's essentially walking down the street with a .357 Magnum away, put it aside, and then let's fight. Harry's like, I'm not stupid. Whereas you just need 4 mates behind you before you can beat up a 10-year-old? Ooh. How old was your appointment in that boxing title? 7, 8? Dudley. He was out cold for 20 minutes. You just wait till I tell Dad. Oh, you're going to run to Daddy now. He's his equal boxing champ. Worried. Not this brave at night, are you? This is night Diddykins. That's what we call it when it gets all dark. I mean when you're in bed. What do you mean I'm not brave in bed? Harry's like, what the hell are you talking about? I heard you last night moaning. Harry knows what he's talking about. Oh, Cedric, don't kill Cedric. Who's Cedric, your boyfriend? Dad, help me. He's going to kill me, boo. Oh, Harry doesn't like this. Now it's Cedric's turned the tables. Dudley's turned the tables. Shut up, Dudley. I'm warning. Ooh, Dad, come help me. Ooh, don't point that thing at me. I told you don't talk about that. What's happened here? Oh, Dudley's gotten a little personal. I said point that thing somewhere else. You understand me? Point. So what happens? Page 16. Forced body done magic without meaning to. Despite the fact he'd been resisting as hard as he could. Again, he's controlling himself. Wait, he can't turn off the stars. But the darkness pressed on his eyes like a weightless veil. Veil's one of those wonderful words where if you pull out a wand and pull a Tom Riddle and you do this, what happens to the word? Rearrange the letters. Well, what happens? There's Dementors, which are weightless. They float upon the ground. Dudley asks, what are you doing? Punches Harry. Harry saves him from the Dementor. Okay. After a few tries. And suddenly he sees Mrs. Figg, page 19. Don't put it away, idiot boy. What if there are more of them around? No, I'm going to kill my youngest Fletcher. And what does Harry find out? Batty old crazy Mrs. Figg is a witch. Well, yeah, kind of. What kind of witch? A squib witch. Ought to be a witch, but she's not. Okay? So she escorts Harry off home because Mundungus Fletcher has ditched them. Where, page 27, he gets another note from Mafalda Hopkirk. Okay? Because he's done magic, told. The ministry is going to be there shortly to destroy your wand. Notice what he doesn't get. No trial, no evidence, no defense. No, your wand's going to be destroyed, cast from the order, all that kind of stuff. Harry's thinking, hell no. An owl comes in from Arthur Weasley. Don't do anything. Don't surrender your wand. Don't leave the house. Don't do any more magic. Dumbledore's trying to sort it out. Harry's thinking, okay. So he sits down. More owls are coming in. Uncle Vernon's getting all angry. He asks, page 31, when Harry tries to tell him about the Dementors. What the ruddy hell are Dementors? They guard the wizard prison, Azkaban.
What?
Harry's like, what? How do you know that? I heard that awful boy telling her about them years ago. If you mean my mom and dad, well, no, she doesn't mean his mom and dad. And he gets another owl from Mafalda Hopkirk. Your wand won't be broken, but you will have a hearing, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So, Harry tells him what happens when a Dementor kisses you, and how he, saved Dudley from having his soul sucked out. And Uncle Vernon's like, way to go, Dudley, fought him off, didn't you? Harry's like, you can't beat up a Dementor. Okay? And so Vernon finally puts two and two back when Harry says, Voldemort's back. Page 37. It felt very strange to be standing here in Aunt Petunia's surgically clean kitchen talking about Dementors and Voldemort. The arrival of the Dementors and Little Winging seemed to have caused a breach in the great invisible wall that divided the relentlessly non-magical world of Privet Drive and the world beyond. In other words, what Rowling is saying is this is our world, the Muggle world, and this is the magical world. And what has just happened? The magical world has just broken through. In other words, the veil has been lifted. Even though Dudley didn't see the Dementors, he's experienced them. Okay? So, the Dursleys were asking for details about the magical world, and Mrs. Figg knew Albus Dumbledore. Dementors were in Little Winging. Harry doesn't understand this. So, what are we told? Harry suddenly, for the first time, looks at Aunt Petunia and realizes she's his mother's sister. Okay? It hits him. The furious pretense that Aunt Petunia had maintained all Harry's life that there was no magic seemed to have fallen away. She understands, in other words. Okay? So when Harry explains Voldemort's back, Vernon says, oh, so this mass murderer guy is sending Dementors after you. Get the hell out of my house. We're in danger while you're here. Okay? And then Petunia gets a howler. Harry, you better open it quickly. Remember my last, Petunia. And what happens? She says, he stays. Why? We don't know. And we don't know who My is at this point. Okay? So, the advanced guards show up. The Dursleys are conned out of the house. And who do we meet? We meet a whole bunch of really cool people. I won't put all their names down. But we see Lupin again. Okay? We see the real Moody. Who else? Tonks. You gotta love Tonks. You know she isn't long for this world. Who else? Kingsley. Tall black guy, bald head, real deep voice. No. Who else? Mundungus Fletcher. Daedalus Diggle. Does Sirius show up here? Nope.
Dodge Sponge.
Who else did I hear?
Doge.
Elphias Doge, who Harry's going to have some conversations with later. Hestia Jones.
Yeah. Sturgis Podmore and Emily Vance.
Sturgis. Something's going to happen to him. And Emmeline Vance. Something's going to happen to her. Okay. By the end of the series, notice, dead, dead.
Wish we could cross out Mundungus.
Okay. So what do? They come and they take Harry and they take him off to the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix. But they don't just take him. What does Mundungus do first? Moody. 54. He says, come here, boy. I need to disillusion you. I need to disillusion you. That means, if you take that word literally, I need to remove illusions from you. Harry's like, what? Disillusionment charm. Lupin says you got an invisibility cloak, but it won't stay on while we're flying. This'll disguise you better. Raps Harry on the head with his wand, and what happens? Harry disappears. Okay? Is it merely that? Or Harry really have to be disillusioned? What are some of the illusions Harry's been living under for the summer?
That no one cares about him.
That no one cares about him. Well, isn't he disillusioned of that? Because look who comes. This is almost the entire Order of the Phoenix. Who's not here? Hagrid, McGonagall, Snape, Sirius, the Weasleys, and Dumbledore. Well, why aren't they there? Because they're all doing something else. In other words, everybody who could be spared is spared to come get Harry. Why? Because he must be pretty darn important. Does Harry realize that? No. Does he come to realize it? Yes. By the end of book 5. Let's stop there and we'll pick up with the next chapter when we return.